Hey, so let's jump into part 2 of this episode. Let's just jump right into the stories from the Bible. Like, what are some, like, growing up in a Christian family or something, or maybe even just stories of the Bible? Like, what are some of the ones that you can think of that perhaps changed or maybe structured your way of thinking or your way of life?
Well, one first that was kind of an in-betweener it's a story from my life that really impacted me. It was, so growing up I hated getting in trouble. So my sister was the more rebellious one. And so I would see her do something and I'd be like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to get in trouble. But there's one time specifically, I don't remember what I did, but I got sent to my room and my parents would always kind of make you sit and just like ponder what you did for a little bit. So you're just like waiting, like, when's it going to happen?
I'd always go to sleep and then I'd get out of it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I didn't get that. No, I was too full of anxiety
I would
if I'm going
pretend
to
to be
get in
asleep.
trouble. No. So I was just sitting on the edge of my bed and our punishment was hot sauce. So you'd get like a little, like just a toothpick of hot sauce, put it on your tongue. It was either Liquid Stupid or Dave's Insanity sauce were the two. And it was not like a spanking where you just be like, oh, you're done. Go on. It lasted a little bit longer.
Yeah,
So,
it's on your mouth.
so we normally,
That's
like I
great.
said, a tip of a toothpick. That was it. But this time my dad comes in with a whole spoon, a spoonful of hot sauce. And I'm just like,
What'd you do?
my eyes got all big. And I was like, that's a lot. And he's like, it is a lot. He comes and sits on the bed next to me. He's like, you know who else got punished for something that they didn't do? And I was just like, Jesus. And he's like, you're right. And he put it in his own mouth. And my dad took the whole spoonful of hot sauce, and that was just something I'll never forget.
That's awesome.
So it was like a Jesus moment. He knew I hated getting in trouble. I wasn't going to do it again. You talk to me sternly, and I'll like tear up. But yeah, that was an impactful thing that you got to tell a story of Jesus' reminder, and to actually do that. My dad's got heartburn now. I kind of feel like it's partially because of that.
All the hot sauce he had to take for you. Like, you weren't there to see it. Every time you did something stupid, he's like, in the
I
back.
hope not. I would hate to learn that. But yeah, that was an impactful thing. That
Whoa.
it was just a cool
That's
part of
really
my
cool.
story now.
Man. Yeah, I love that. I mean, even just seeing that within people, like, one of the ones that I can give some credit to, like, I was really stupid when I was young, and I like to think I've grown out
I'm
of
glad you
that.
grew out of it. I feel like I'm
I-
stupid.
Yeah, but what I really appreciate my youth pastor, just kind of seeing how he behaves and how he walks, or his interactions. That just kind of like, I was like, that's the kind of guy I would want to be something like. I really respect that, and it's not always like a Bible story behind every single thing. It wasn't a verse behind every single action he did, but it was just seeing something good is like, man, this is really like a good picture or a good story that like I can remember and I can just kind of be more like. And so I don't know, like, yeah, I love it. Like, when you're talking about your dad, like that's like it's not just like something you read off the pages of a book, but it's something you're seeing right in front of you that just kind of like, whoa, that kind of connects a lot of dots.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of stories you got come to mind?
Are we talking about the Bible
We
now?
can talk about Jesus.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I guess you can bring up Jesus. Whatever,
Okay.
I guess.
I mean, yeah, there's so many stories in the Bible
Yeah.
that are impactful and resonate and pierce you and cut you to the heart.
And so
but-
many that you're like, why is that in there?
Yeah. Like I'm in 2 Kings right now, and I love that portion where they're like baldy head, and like the she bears come out and eat them, and like why is that?
Yeah.
But
That's Elisha.
yeah.
Mm.
But no, I love the Bible and I love the stories of the Bible. Something that's been so big for me though is like, I think most people don't know the story of the Bible. I think most people think the Bible is a book of religion and a book of rules. There was this Hindu guy that this missionary Leslie Newbegin heard from, and this guy was like, "Why do you Christians bring this Bible over to us and give it to us like as a book of religion? This is not a book of religion. This is a very unique book with an understanding of the history of the universe," something along those lines.
That's cool.
So he was basically saying like, this is a different take on how you Christians view all of history
Yeah.
as it's being told. And I think that's so true. And I think most people don't know that from Genesis to Revelation, all 66 books are telling a unified story over all those authors, over all that time that it was written, and it all points to Jesus. And there is a drama that's being unfolded.
Yeah.
And I think when you can know that, believe it, embrace it, it changes those little stories within it. And I think it gives you a different perspective of your own story and life. That's essential, because if you are a believer, that story of God that's told from Genesis to Revelation is inviting you into it, because that story isn't over yet. We know the ending.
Yeah, right.
And so, but we're not there yet. And so what is our role? What is our place in that story? So that's been pretty big for me.
Yeah, I just like just reading it, and just, I know at some points some parts of it might seem like instructional.
You know what's my favorite story?
Oh, yeah, let's
Sorry.
just jump there. Go for it.
Sorry, my favorite story is Esther.
Esther.
I love the book
I
of
just
Esther.
read Esther, and it was so good. I'm like, this needs to be a movie.
I
whole thing.
love Esther so much. I love that book.
There's so
Yeah.
many
That story.
twists and turns,
Yeah.
and then the like Haman gets like thrown into it, and it's so ironic, and you're like laughing at Haman. Haman's the bad guy, and then yeah, it's
Haman?
just so much back and forth,
Mhm.
and it's just you can't help but smile. 'Cause
Yeah,
you're like,
I think
yeah.
like if I was like pushing in a corner, I was like, you're gonna be on a stranded island for the rest of your life, and you can have one book. I feel like Esther might be one of them
Mhm.
if I had to pick.
Isn't that like the only book that doesn't mention the word God?
It does, I think. Yeah. What would you guys pick? What story? What story would you
okay.
pick?
What like
Not
from the
So-
book
Bible?
necessarily, but what story? Yeah.
Well, I guess this is a book and a story, but I love Job. You know.
oh, Job.
I'm
Yeah.
reading through Job.
Yeah.
Job.
Um,
Do you actually say Job?
No, I say Job.
Okay.
The Hebrew is Job.
Is it?
Job.
No.
But no, I love that one. Kind of as you talked about earlier, like, do you like stories you relate to, or that you kind of connect with? And by no means have I ever had my entire family killed in one day or lost all my sheep, but I just, from my background with going through depression and even like suicide, just knowing like Job and just all that kind of story, and just reading how that kind of plays out is so like, I don't know. I listened to it the whole day yesterday, and like there was a couple of chapters I had to repeat because it's just so good. Like I'm more of a listener than a reader, so I just kind of like I hear more audibly, and I love that one. If there's one I could read, I think that one easily I've read like probably, like if I had to, all the time I spent on the Bible, I would say like maybe 40% of that time is in Job. Yeah, for sure. That's for me. What about you guys? One book,
I don't know.
one story.
Before I do that,
One parable.
I'm reading through Job
Sorry.
right now, and I love the beginning and I love the ending, but
Yeah.
the middle is
His
kind
friends
of
are.
bland.
It's so rich in the middle. I
The friends are they start off so strong.
Yeah.
They do, because they just show up and they're like, I'm here for my friend. And they just sit with him for like a week. And then they start talking, and you're just like, shh.
Yeah.
You were so good.
But there's a lesson to learn in that story. Just shut your mouth sometimes. Like his
Yeah.
friends were so good and helpful until they opened their mouth, and it's like sometimes I'm thinking to myself, dang, maybe I should just shut my mouth
Oh,
sometimes.
I think that all the time about me, not you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You're probably like, this is one of those times you should shut your mouth, Andrew.
No. Have you heard the song "Where Were You" by Ghost Ships?
Yes, you were the one who shared that with me.
Ghost chips.
Ghost Ships.
Oh,
ghost ships.
Ghost ships.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Flying
yeah. I
Dutchman.
love
The whole
I
thing
think
is
it's
like-
Ghost Ship, and I love them.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing is about like Job asking, "Where were you when all this crap happened?" And then it's just God's reply, like at the end of the book.
Where
were
of,
you?
"Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Where were you when I created the foundation of the earth? Where were you when this
Yeah.
happened?" And I love that. Like, I love the book of Job because it shows that God is like sassy, and
Yeah.
that's such a good part.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I just even one of the cool things. It's just one of those like endings where like conclusions. You're like, is that's it? Like you wish there was more. Like
It's like
God
Jonah.
doesn't really explain why chapters 1 and 2 happened. He just kind of goes like, "Who are you, Job, to ask? Who are you to question me?" And then Job's like, "Okay, I learned my lesson." And it's one of those where I'm like, I wish God kind of gave an explanation after that. Like what was this whole ordeal? But that's part of what I love, like a little bit of mystery or a little bit of like just kind of there's so much more to grasp as you keep reading it over, but I never fully get it, and I think that's just part of what attracts it, or makes it so attractive for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
My favorite book is probably Proverbs. I feel like that's
a
the
good
one I
story.
just keep going back to.
yeah.
Yeah. I like it. It's a good one.
It's part of the story, yeah.
It's part of
Yeah,
the whole
it's part
thing.
of
It's
it.
one of the books.
Genesis, man, is
Sounds
Is-
crazy.
so good too.
Yeah.
There's just so much in it and so many weird things. And I feel like often people, you were talking about how people just they don't grasp the Bible, and it's just confusing. And I think it will be forever confusing. Like you were talking about, like our brains aren't meant to completely comprehend God or his word just because we're not God.
Mm.
But I think a huge distinction that I hear is generally like they feel like the Old Testament and the New Testament almost contradicts each other, because the whole Old Testament, they just see God like wiping out armies and smiting people, and the old "Smite me, Almighty Smiter." I think it was Bruce Almighty. Anyways, so that, and then in the New Testament, it's all like Jesus loves you and he's with the children and all that, and they're like, that doesn't make sense. How is this the same guy?
Mm.
But I love that you point out how throughout the whole thing, it's one solid story. And if you're looking in the Old Testament, you're seeing after the reason God does all these to us awful things, like it's for at the end of this, they're going to know that I'm God. And the whole thing is to bring people to him. Everything he does is like, no, come to me. You're going the wrong way. Okay, well, this is the consequence of that. This is what's going to happen. And it's this constant of reeling you back in. Like, I want you over here. I know that that's not going to end well for you. Okay, now it happened. Okay, now you're back. And then they go away again.
Well, here's how, and maybe see if you guys agree with this. Here's how I would summarize the story of the Bible. The first half, or Old Testament, I would say, is us people pushing God away and going our own direction. New Testament is Jesus is now like coming in our direction to meet us up. Like now in the second half, like Jesus is now, he's the one who's coming towards us, and we just kind of bump into him. Like, kind of like even when we're talking about stories, I love the parables that Jesus gives, like especially there's like in Luke 15 where there's like those 3 parables where first Jesus, has 100 sheep and 99 of them are all in a good place, but this one just goes off in his own direction. And instead of being like, I got 99 left, like what's -1 really? But like it just shows such a big heart. Like I think that story shows God's heart in ways that like you could read so much of the Old Testament and miss. In that short story, it just shows him seeking out one of us, or especially I think everyone would probably know this, the story of the prodigal son. Like, I think that's probably that's probably one of the most famous stories out there, I would say.
I think I went over it in one of our previous episodes, actually. Kind of gave the
yeah,
brief
yeah.
overview of what that
Yeah.
is. But yeah, Jesus saw the importance of stories because they connect people. You don't have to be a smart person to grasp a story. And a lot of the people he was talking to were uneducated fishermen and farmers and all that.
I now
Common
understand
people.
why I like stories so much.
Why? Because Jesus told him?
Oh yeah, that probably.
He was saying because he wasn't smart.
Oh.
Because anyone can grasp them throughout
Yeah.
the whole spectrum. You
Yeah.
can hear a story, but at the same time, you can kind of connect with different parts. Like the fact that for thousands of years we've been going through the same 66 books, like the same stories over and over and over, and every time we're still learning something new.
Yeah.
Like we will never not learn something from it, and it's
Yeah.
the same stories. It's the same ones that were written so far, though.
Yeah.
It gives
I
you
think
grasp
too,
different
like
things.
you make sense out of life because this tells you the story of life.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, God created. If that's part of what you believe to be true about the story of the universe, that in the beginning there was a creator God who made everything, who made you, that alone will drastically transform the way you think and live, because there's a creator and I'm a creature.
Mm-hmm.
He made me. Or if it's like you're completely opposite and you're just like, well, we're here by chance, and when we die, it's just gonna be black, and it won't be black even because we can't see, and it's just
Yeah.
worms eat us and that's it. Then if that's the way you understand the story of the universe, then that's gonna drastically change the way you live and function in life.
Mhm.
But the Bible is like cohesive, like creation. God the king created everything. There was a rebellion against the king. The king chooses a people for himself. The king comes to his people.
Yeah.
The church is born. Christ comes again. Like this kind of real simply put. You were talking about like kind of Old Testament, New Testament. I heard this pastor say once, he said something like, it's kind of like the Old Testament, God's like, I love you so much. And the people are like, yeah, we'll prefer something else. And then like the New Testament, he's like, now I'm going to really love you. Which I kind of loved, like, because it is true. Like he was pursuing us, pursuing his people, but they just consistently did what was right in their own eyes. And
Yeah.
God was just and would act on his justice, but he would continue to pursue his people.
But isn't that interesting? Like, I don't know, when you just said, like, they were doing what they thought was right in their eyes. Isn't that, like, one of the repeated phrases in Judges?
Yeah.
Like, and that's where, probably the most messed up history of Israel is, like, we're trying to do the right thing in our own eyes, but, like, that's just when we go really off. So, yeah, just that, I don't know. That just made me think of Judges when he said that.
Yeah.
Made me think of that. We keep saying they, like we aren't in the same boat. Like, yeah, I want to do that. This is what I think is best. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then it doesn't go very well.
Well, you know what's great about the Bible too, and like the story of Scripture is so often I'm reading the Bible, but it's really reading me. It's just showing, it's a mirror. It's reading me. It's showing me who I am. But like you just said, that's us doing what's right in our own eyes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it just reminds me of the saying, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Like, like it's just, we want to do what we think is best, and that's where we go wrong. I don't know. Like, is there, like, to me, like, when I think of, like, why I love stories, when I think of who God is, one of my favorite stories that just kind of shares maybe, just kind of shares what am I here? Like, what is this? Is, I think it's John chapter 9, where Jesus heals this blind man. What's just so interesting and why I love that story is this blind, like, the Pharisees is like, give God the glory because this man is a sinner. And this blind guy, like, he doesn't know. He's just like, I just got healed. And he's like, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. But I was blind, but now I see. And that, like, simple line right there just kind of just shares just, God isn't asking us to know or understand or see everything in our situation, but just to see him is enough. And, like, I love that story. I can never, like, I can never read that story or listen to it without, like, pausing and reflecting, just thinking, like, man, it's just so good. It's so good that, like, God doesn't ask us to be smart or wise or have understanding. He gives us. He literally just opens our eyes, and now we start to see, and we don't know why, we don't know how.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Is there any kind of like, if you had to like describe, if like someone's asking like, I don't know, like, does Jesus love me? Like, is there a story you guys would come to, or is there like a story somewhere in the Bible or parable that you just think of best quality of God or something?
How about he died for you?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a pretty big
I
one.
think that's a good one. How about, I guess I should start further back, the fact that God is all powerful, all knowing, omnipresent, omniscient, all the
Yeah.
omni things, and he can do anything he wants. He's perfectly content and happy in the Trinity, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and then he just decides to make us, and not only that, but then to humble himself, to come down as not a king or anything, but as a servant, as the very lowest. And first of all, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just that fact alone. Then proceeds to live a normal life, and then goes about loving the unlovable, to then die for me, to then die for you, to die for the worst person that you can think of. Jesus died for them. And then that's the story. And then he goes up to heaven, and then he's going to come back again for us. There's the story.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised we probably should have hit that sooner. You know, the whole center point of the Bible, you know, right? Like, what do you guys often see on the front cover of your Bible? It's just the cross. Like, that's the very center point.
Which is kind of funny to think, but I don't know, funny is probably not the right word, but everyone is just like, hey, look at this torture device that caused so much anguish and pain. Let's put it on my car mirror.
Yeah, because it looks kind of cool, you know?
Or tattoo it on your arm.
Oh, yeah,
the
like
idea.
that, you know?
But I think the point is that it is empty. Like, that's the torture device. There's nobody on that anymore.
Yeah.
I remember hearing a preacher talk once about he used to have a big old cross with like Jesus on it, and he went to I'm from Wyoming, so a rodeo Bible camp. So you do rodeo things and they preach the gospel.
That's a Wyoming thing, right?
But he went there, and like one of the workers there came up and was like, "What's that?" And he's like, "It's Jesus." And he like goes up to it and rips Jesus off the cross, and he's like, "Jesus ain't there anymore."
Yeah. Yeah, just as far as I love connecting how like the Bible itself is one big story, and just knowing or reading these stories or reading these, you know, little snippets just really shapes us. Kind of how you just said, like, you're reading it and it's more like it's reading you. Like, it kind of makes you reflect and makes you think about yourself. It's not necessarily like, here's some distant people, but it just becomes relevant, I guess, to us. And I think that's just such a big thing. And it's even just knowing the Bible, it's so impactful to know other stories, because we just shared earlier, just you kind of share, we learn from other people's stories. We learn whether it's the good or bad, and it's, you know, how's the saying go? Like, smart people learn from mistakes, but wise people learn from other people's mistakes. Like, we can learn so much from just learning the story of God and learning the stories, and particularly the stories of Jesus and how that shows him or exemplifies him. So yeah, I just think that's such a great way to let's end it here, and I think we can get into the stories of maybe some other stuff for people. So thank you guys for coming here tonight, and yeah, have yourself a good evening.